Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at a whole stack of philosophical insights and ancient wisdom, drawing a lot from people like Gerard Kite, Andy Puddicombe, the Taoist tradition, and we're trying to find one thing, really, inner permanence.
Yeah, or what we're calling home.
Exactly, home. And the mission for you here is, well, it's pretty simple on the surface. We want to find a practical way to navigate all the challenges life throws at you.
Right, without getting constantly knocked around by the outside world, or, let's be honest, more often by the chaos inside your own head.
We're looking for stability in a world that just feels fundamentally unstable, and it almost seems like our culture is designed to push us away from that.
It is. I mean, our aspirational, fast-paced society is always telling us to look outward.
For everything.
For everything, for your purpose, for validation, for the next hit of something. And all that does is build complexity and, confusion. You end up totally dependent on what other people think.
It makes me think of that quote from the environmentalist David Suzuki. He perfectly captured this whole dilemma.
Yeah. Oh, the one about the car.
Yeah. He said something like, "We are in a giant car heading towards a brick wall, and everyone's arguing over where they're going to sit."
And that's it, isn't it? We get so distracted by our own little dramas and where we stand that we miss the huge, obvious direction we're all heading in.
So the philosophical answer to this, it seems, is about unifying your approach to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Andy Puddicombe talks about this beautifully, connecting awareness and compassion. He says they aren't two separate things you go out and find. They're more like sunlight and warmth.
They're a package deal.
Exactly. Awareness gives you perspective, and compassion, enriches your life with kindness. He says they are one and the same thing.
Okay, so if awareness and compassion are one, and our goal is this permanent state of inner peace home, then we need a path to get there. Where does the actual journey start?
It has to start with looking at the thinking mind objectively, because that's our biggest source of distress. Gerard Kite has a fantastic model for this. He calls it the pendulum metaphor.
Right. So imagine a huge weight just swinging wildly.
Yeah, and all your attention is just glued to that movement, to the drama of the swing.
And that swinging weight is basically our emotional life from moment to moment. A swing to the right is the high, joy, excitement.
And a swing to the left is the low, the sadness, the anger, depression.
And most of us are living our lives right there, on the weight itself, in that chaotic state. The middle is, what, just a brief moment of calm before you get flung the other way?
Precisely. It's only relative calm. You know you're about to swing back into the drama at any second.
So the goal isn't to, stop the pendulum. That seems impossible.
Impossible. The goal is to shift your entire point of perception. It's a huge psychological jump. Instead of focusing on the weight, you look up the shaft.
All the way to the top.
All the way to the fixed point at the top, because up there's no movement at all. That is true home. As you move your perspective up that shaft, the volatility of the swings, the power they have over you, it gradually reduces. You get some objectivity.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also feels like the world is actively trying to keep us swinging, Advertising, social media, the news.
Absolutely.
So how do you keep that calm from just being a fragile little retreat? Is that fixed point actually achievable?
It's both. The fixed point is the ultimate state. But the process of moving up the shaft, that's the practice. That's what's achievable. It's the shift from saying, I am angry, to I can observe the feeling of anger passing through my awareness.
You realize you're the shaft, not the swinging weight.
Yes. And that objectivity lets you engage with life without getting immediately sucked back down into the extremes.
And the practical takeaway here, as the sources all point out, is so critical. You only make choices or big decisions when you're operating from that place of calm.
Absolutely. Making a decision when you're euphoric or furious. It's always based on a faulty perception of reality. The volatile state is profitable for other people, but it destroys our internal objectivity.
And that objectivity is what we need to start dismantling the false identity we've all built.
Yes, the cult of I, as Kite calls it. We're taught from day one that we are fundamentally separate, and our worth depends entirely on this collection of labels we create for ourselves.
It's a constant project of building a narrative, isn't it? We spend our lives just foraging for evidence to confirm whatever the mind is telling us about who we are.
We do. We define ourselves by memories of what happened and fantasies about what might happen, and we completely miss what's happening right now.
And when you say we should strip away the labels and see that everyone is just a person, well, isn't that a little dangerous? Doesn't that risk dismissing someone's unique history, their trauma?
That's a really important question. It's not about ignoring your history. It's about realizing your history is a story you tell yourself. not the core essence of your being.
It's context, not identity.
It's vital context. But if you believe you are your history, you're chained to it forever. The goal is agility, the ability to step back and see that under all the job titles and accomplishments and failures, we're all the same thing. Consciousness having an experience.
So the cultivi is kind of like our LinkedIn profile, the perfectly curated but totally exhausting performance of a self.
That's a perfect way to put it. And nowhere is that performance more obvious than in our obsession with success. We define ourselves by these external things that are, by their very nature, unstable.
Right, which is why that Winston Churchill insight is so powerful. He said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. The stability is in the continuing, not the outcome."
And the mind will fight you on that because it loves patterns. It tries to maintain them just because they're familiar, even if they're hurting you. It's constantly juggling memories and projecting into the future. But this is where free will actually comes in.
And how is it defined here? Because it's not some grand cosmic choice.
No, it's simply the freedom to choose your point of perception, the freedom to decide where you put your attention, on the swinging weight or up the shaft. That's really the only freedom that matters because it lets you break free from the mind's automatic conditioned responses.
That choice is so empowering. It means the complexity of life doesn't have to crush us. It makes me think of what Leonard Cohen said. There's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in.
Yes, the imperfections are where the awareness can shine through. And our relationships are maybe the best mirror for seeing where we're putting that awareness.
Which brings us to perception in projection. The theory that whatever we perceive out in the world is a direct projection of our own internal state.
It's a challenging idea.
Yeah.
But if you constantly feel like people are judging you, the theory would suggest that maybe you're just projecting your own harsh inner critic onto them.
That's a huge one. So the emotional trap is we abandon our calm, we project our own self-created stuff onto other people, and then we call that fantasy truth.
And then we react to our own projections. We literally create conflict because it's a familiar pattern for the mind to follow.
And the sources are all very clear. It has to start with self-love. You can't project stability if you don't have that home inside first. It's what Hemingway was getting at when he wrote, "The most painful thing is losing yourself in the process of loving someone too much and forgetting that you are special too."
And the only way back from that projection, back to stability, is to root yourself in the now.
Eckhart Tolle is the anchor here, isn't he? He says, realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now the primary focus of your life.
So simple, but so hard. And why is it so hard? Because we try to enter the present while still carrying all this psychological baggage from the past and all this anxiety about the future.
It's impossible.
You can't do it. But the Taoist understood that our natural state, the here and now, is already one of contentment and peace. It's our default setting. We've just covered it up with mental clutter.
Let's get into that ancient wisdom. The Taoists weren't just thinking about spirit as a belief. For them, it was, what? An energetic reality.
Exactly. It's a feeling thing, beyond words or thoughts. It's the conduit between your inner world and your outer world. They had that beautiful phrase, as within, so without.
Your internal landscape creates your external reality.
And the body is the ultimate anchor for that reality. What's so interesting is that the ancient Chinese didn't see the mind as just the brain. The mind was the total activity of all the organs. The body is the physical expression of grace.
And the key to connecting with that body, the tool to shift your attention away from the thinking mind, is the breath.
It's always the breath.
So how did the Taoists break that down?
They saw the in-breath as our connection to the formless, to heaven. It's pure potential. The out-breath connects us to form, to the earth. It's a celebration of life and death, of taking in and letting go.
Just focusing on that rhythm can pull you out of a mental spiral.
Instantly, it roots you in your physical being, which brings us to the core of the whole Taoist system. They saw the Tao as this formless space, pure awareness, the source of everything.
And from that, you get yin and yang, the law of opposites.
The building blocks of the universe. And that led to this incredibly sophisticated model of the laws of 5 elements, which basically shows that we aren't solid, fixed things. We're collections of movements and processes.
Okay, let's unpack the 5 elements because this feels like a real practical roadmap for our internal weather. We start with wood.
Wood. Its spring, its growth, and its emotion is anger. Its virtue is benevolence. But when it's out of balance, that energy can swing from like crippling timidity to explosive rage. It needs room to grow.
Then comes fire, summer, maturing.
Fire is closest to our spiritual root. It's held together by love and order. Too much fire, you get hyperexcitation. Too little, you feel joyless. It governs the heart.
After fire, we have earth. Late summer, the harvest.
Its virtue is integrity. It governs giving and receiving. When your earth is out of whack, you worry, you overthink everything, and you can't accept nourishment from food or from other people.
Yeah. Then we move into autumn with metal, the condensing phase.
Metal is about righteousness. But crucially, it's the energy you need for letting go. When your metal is healthy, you can put the past down. When it's weak, you just cling to grief and old ideas.
And finally, water, winter, regeneration.
This is the origin of all life, but it's also linked to our deepest survival fears. Water governs our will. If it's out of a balance, you're just paralyzed by fear. You lack the basic will to move.
And what's so beautiful is how they all work together in a cycle. Wood feeds fire, fire creates earth, earth creates metal, and so on.
It shows that our emotions are designed to be a team. They aren't enemies. And this was all applied directly to the body with the Chinese organ clock.
Right, where different organs have peak energy at different times of day. For example, the wood phase, that's from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m.
That covers the gallbladder, which needs deep rest, and then the liver, which detoxifies your blood and handles dreams. So if you're always waking up in a panic at 2 a.m., that's a physical signal.
It's your wood element saying there's an internal imbalance, maybe unresolved anger or stress. The system connects consciousness and chemistry. It's brilliant.
And once you integrate this awareness, this objectivity, and you understand your own internal cycles, you naturally start to relax. You start living in the present, accepting life without judging it so harshly, and compassion just sort of arises on its own.
Okay, so if the mind is the problem and the body is the path, how do we consistently make that shift in attention? The sources point to surrender rituals, right? Like meditation or prayer.
Yeah, they call them spiritual keys. They're mechanisms to shift attention from the chaotic thinking mind to the quiet, observing being self. That's where you can experience that inherent peace, that bliss.
And the key insight is that you don't have to change your life to find home.
Not at all. You just have to change your relationship to your life. It's the punchline of that great Zen parable. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
The task doesn't change. Your presence within the task is what changes.
And that realization leads to the core message that's really under all of this, which is know yourself as love. When you operate from that settled state, the world just starts mirroring it back to you. It's like Rumi Day said, what you seek is seeking you.
The search ends when the internal realization begins, and that self-love is so tied to freedom through forgiveness. I was so moved by the words of Eva Kor, the Holocaust survivor.
Oh, her words are incredibly powerful.
She said, the only way you can heal yourself is to forgive those who have harmed you. I call forgiveness the best revenge, because from the time you forgive, the perpetrator no longer has the power to control you.
It's the ultimate act of reclaiming your own attention. It is the final step in the journey home. Realizing it's already here and your freedom is non-negotiable.
So what does this all mean for you? Finding your way home is really about dismantling that illusory, anxious self you thought you were. It's realizing the depth of your existence is already inside you. It's an opportunity to look at the world with curiosity and innocence again.
At its core, finding your way home is, well, it's a good old-fashioned love story. It's about finally falling head over heels in love with yourself.
And that journey starts the moment you stop trying to fix the outside world, which is the provocative thought we want to leave you with from Carl Jung. He said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens."